Alright, so here's this week's weekly Nightfall. It's the Fallen Saber. I'm doing a solo Flawless Master run. The modifiers this week are Solar Shanks and Togetherness. The daily modifier is a non-factor. It's Cosmic Superconductors, but it only affects you if you're using Arc or Stasis as your subclass. And I'm using a Solar Titan, so not an issue there. But I actually went with Sunbreaker because that takes care of the first two modifiers that I mentioned. With there being solar, normally there's no solar shields at all to deal with on this strike, like even on Grandmaster. So you don't have to worry about that at all. And then Togetherness means you've got no way to heal, like you have no base health recovery. So it means you need to come up with a build that either has a healing ability or you build into it with your mods. So and I mean, Warlock is usually a top choice for Togetherness or Attrition because you can just put a healing rift down and then healing's not an issue. But I wanted to play with Titan, and originally I went with Void because Void is a good subclass to go with for Titan. Not that you get healing from your class abilities, but the fact that you can give yourself an overshield on demand means that even though your health isn't good, I mean you have an overshield, so you got damage resistance. And you could use Echo of Leeching, so that when you get charged melee kills, or I think it's any melee kills at all while you have an overshield, it'll restore your health. So Void's a good class to go with. Also, there's a couple Void shields to deal with in this strike. So there's that. But I ended up going with Striker because while I was about halfway through my run, or not Striker, Sunbreaker, because when I was about halfway through my run with Void, I realized that the Shanks had solar shields because I didn't pay attention to that modifier. So I started over with Sunbreaker, and I figured I could just use fusion grenades and throwing hammer to take care of the Shanks and my super. And then I could use whatever weapons I want. Obviously you could just use Arbalest, and then you can take care of all the Void shields, all the solar shields, no problem. And then you can still equip Arc as your other weapons so that you can match the acute Arc burn. So going with a Solar Titan solved two issues for me: healing because of Togetherness and the Solar Shanks. And I also haven't used Sunbreaker very much. I think I did 2 videos this entire season with Sunbreaker, so it's been a while. So it was kind of nice to switch it up. Take off the Heart of Inmost Light and put on the other broken exotic, Loreley Splendor. So if you didn't know what Loreley Splendor does, it consumes your class ability as long as it's full. So if you got your rally barricade ready to go, if you get critical, then Loreley Splendor will consume your barricade and drop a sunspot at your feet. It's not going to drop a barricade, it's just going to drop a sunspot. So you may want to take note that if you want to use your rally barricade whenever, I suggest you drop the barricade before you get critical on health, because if you get critical, then Loreley Splendor is just going to do it for you. It's just going to consume it and drop the sunspot. But if you put your barricade down, then you get the barricade and the sunspot. So it's better if you can proc Loreley Splendor on demand as opposed to just letting the enemies get you to critical health and then having it automatically kick in. Also, if you get into the habit of just letting Loreley Splendor automatically create the sunspot for you. It means you might get a little bit too comfortable not paying attention to your class ability. And then, so if your rally barricade's not ready to go, and you're not paying attention because you just think that Loreley Splendor is going to take care of you when you get critical, well, yeah, if rally barricade's not up and Loreley Splendor's not going to proc, and when you get critical, you're just going to die instead of getting the instant healing. So, so other than that, the weapons I'm using Quicksilver Storm because it does arc damage, which is crazy. It's the only kinetic primary slot weapon that does elemental damage like that. So it's not every shot, but it's every time one of those homing missiles are fired out of it, which automatically happens every few bullets. It's arc damage. You can see them all, they fly out like every second or two. So you can instantly melt arc shields with Quicksilver Storm, and it's doing the arc damage, which is matching the acute arc burn, and it's a primary exotic, so it already does like 40% more damage than normal or something like that. So all around a good weapon to use with arc and when there's barriers, because auto rifles can take care of barriers for us this season. And then I'm using my Under Your Skin bow with explosive head and Archer's Tempo that I crafted from Season of the Risen. That is primarily just to stun overloads and break void shields, because there are 2 or 3, maybe more, void shielded servitors that you got to take care of. And then I'm using Storm Chaser for my heavy. Whenever there's an acute burn, I always try to match my biggest damage weapon to the burn, because taking care of like red bars and minor enemies isn't such a huge deal. Like, you don't need to match the burn to take care of them easily. But priority targets, which are usually tankier targets, those are the ones that you want to immediately get rid of. So it's just generally a good idea to always try and match the burn to your heavy, and then whatever else you need to take care of shields, you can deal with that on your special or your primary. Yeah, and so the Storm Chaser that I use for solos is I have auto loading holster and frenzy on it, and it's probably my most used heavy out of all of them. You know, I've got a raid version that I use, raid dungeon version with firing line and rapid hit, and that does insane damage too. Like on King's Fall, especially, because a lot of the enemies are close enough and their crit area is big enough that you can land all 3 of the burst shots. So Storm Chaser on King's Fall pretty much consistently puts me near the top of the damage leaderboard. And then for solos, having auto loading holster is just so good, because if I could choose for anything for solos as far as perks, I would have almost all the time I would have 2 out of 3 weapons have auto loading holster, and then just make it so that the weapon that I'm going to be using the most, that doesn't matter, but the other 2 weapons that I need to switch to every now and then for specific reasons, I like to have those with auto loading. That way I don't have to worry about reloading them when I ready them or when I stow them. You know, I could just pull it out, shoot it, put it back, and then get back onto my main weapon. So yeah, and then Frenzy is just a really good damage perk too. And then for my super, So you will have noticed there my super did crazy damage. So Hammer of Saul is, yeah, Sunbreaker doesn't have the best damage supers, but Hammer of Saul is super good at ad clearing. And you don't have to get up close and personal to use it like other roaming supers. Like it's kind of like a ranged roaming super. But I'm using Ember of Combustion to enhance it even more. So anytime I get a kill with my super, which is basically, you know, every hammer that I throw, it's going to set off an ignition. So not only am I getting sunspots from Soul Invictus for every kill with the Hammer of Saul, but I'm also setting off ignitions. So, and especially in these dense close quarter rooms, it gets pretty crazy. So, and it takes care of all the solar Shanks at the same time, all the tethered enemies, and then I can just focus the barrier afterwards without worrying about immune enemies that are going to be shooting me that I can't deal with. So I use it a few times just for that purpose, and you'll see at the boss fight it gets pretty crazy. There's going to be like a dozen Shanks flying around, and half of them are going to be tethered to the barrier, and then I just pop Hammer of Saul and set off some fireworks. It was pretty fun. So it does take a little bit more time, of course, and a little bit of luck to be able to land your solar abilities to take care of the solar shields, but it does work. So, like there, those two snipers were next to each other, and then I was able to hit my hammer on one, and the elemental explosion from breaking the shield took out the adjacent shield as well. I believe I'm using sniper resistance on my chest piece as well, because a lot of the vandals, like in the opening encounter, they can catch you off guard and snipe you. Like they'll flank you and you don't see them, and next thing you know you're getting sniped like 2 shots and you're dead. And then there's the sniper Shanks like in that room there, and then there's going to be some in this room, and then there's a bunch in the boss room too. So I do think I'm not 100% sure if I have it on for this. I think I do, and even if I don't, I would recommend that you use it. I may have swapped it out for the double thermoshock plating, so that I would have double arc resistance and double solar resistance. I mean, either one of those options is good. You can just do one thermoshock with a sniper resistance, or you can do double. But I do feel like sniper resistance is probably the better play. So for this section here, I just wait till the next arc. I get my sunspot going first so that I have restoration. Even though it doesn't seem to have procced, I guess because my health wasn't low. But even if I wasn't on solar, like if I was using void, I would put my barricade down, get an overshield, and then grab the orb and go. But the trick is to go right after the arc wave passes, and then you just sprint and slide. That's the fastest way to do it. And then you can chuck a grenade while you're running down there, or you can just not, and you can literally just slide your way into the deposit. Once you deposit the orb, you just stay crouched in the corner there, and the enemies seem to refuse to kill you. Like they'll get you like critical, but for some reason they just let you live. So if you play it like that, you should be fine. And then this room here can get pretty intense. There's a lot of enemies, so it's good to know that you can just come back to this hallway, and you can, even if the door closes, you can go back to it. The door will open for you. You can go through, and then you can kind of recover, and then re-enter with another plan of attack. So after a few seconds, the barrier will spawn in. So ideally, it's good if you can go in and get that overload out of the way right away. That way the barrier doesn't tether the overload. But it's not always possible to do it, so... In this case, the barrier came out, tethered a whole bunch of enemies, and I was able to kill them all with my super. And now it's just the barrier left with the overload, which makes it 10 times easier to take care of the barrier. And then now I've got 3 overloads to deal with, I think. I'm also using Radiant, of course, because it's pretty much the best fragment that you can put on solar subclasses. Because it's a 25% damage buff to all of your weapons, which is basically like Font of Might, but better because it applies... It's easier to proc because all you have to do is hit an enemy with your charged melee. And then it doesn't just apply to your to a weapon that matches the same element as your subclass, like Font of Might. It applies to all your weapons, and it's like 10-15 seconds, something like that. And then with Sunbreaker, with throwing hammers, the fact that you can hit an enemy with your throwing hammer and just pick your hammer right back up makes Radiant kind of broken on Sunbreaker, because you can just have the uptime on it like constantly. And even if I use my hammer at range, I'm not worried about it, because I don't need to go and fetch my hammer, because I've got tier 10 strength. Not only that, but the hammer actually, once it sits on the ground there for a bit before you, like if you don't pick it up, it'll blow up like a little miniature grenade and cause damage that way as well. The one thing I will say with throwing hammer is it's super easy. Like if you play a lot of Solar Titan, I see a lot of people crutch on throwing hammer to the point where they don't know what to do when they lose their hammer. Like they always have to have it. But it's kind of a handicap in a way, because you shouldn't feel like you always have to be in the middle of a fight right next to an enemy to be killing them and then picking your hammer right up again right away. Because then if you rely on it too much, you kind of forget how to play normally. You know, like maybe it's better that you just play it safe, you know, play from a distance. So one way to do that is you can just run a higher strength stat and not worry about losing your hammer. I'm also using Ember of Solace, I think it is. It's the one that extends the duration of Radiant and Restoration. I don't think I really needed it though, because even though I am making use out of Radiance and Restoration, I can proc them so often that it's almost not even worth it to have an extra few seconds on the timer, because I could just refresh the timer on demand with my throwing hammer or by making sunspots. So in retrospect, I probably would have swapped out Ember of Solace for a different fragment, like possibly the one that refreshes your melee energy when you scorch targets, because then I would get my hammer back even faster, and then I would be able to be Radiant even more often. Right, so in a sense, it's better. It's even better than Ember of Solace, because you don't need extra time on the clock when you can just refresh the clock, basically. Yeah, and then I'm using, I'm not sure if I mentioned it, I'm using Ember of Singeing as well, so I scorch targets, I get my class ability back. Which, if you're using Loreley Splendor, it's just something that you want to use anyway, because you want your uptime on your class ability. So for the boss room here, I play the first half of his health, play it over in this section. Then when he gets to the halfway point and he goes immune, or he goes away, you take care of all the ads, and then when he re-emerges, then you start to make your way over to the left side of the room. Because these posts that come up from the ground, like they'll get charged with arc. So like right now on the left side of the room, there's arc everywhere. So if you go over there and touch something with arc, you're gonna get shocked and you can die. So this is the safe spot to play from for the first half, and then you migrate over to the other side for the last half. I think the first half, the boss is a sniper, so you gotta watch out for that as well, which is another good reason to go with sniper resistance. So you can see here, like I was a little bit apprehensive to use my throwing hammer on these flying targets. Even the fusion grenade, seems to track and stick to targets way better on grounded targets than it does on flying targets, which is a bit unfortunate because that was the whole reason I went with fusion grenades, was I thought it would be easy to stick flying targets. But yeah, the tracking and the aim assist doesn't really seem to work all that well. You have to be pretty right on target with your grenade when you throw it to land it. But Quicksilver Storm, with each homing missile that hits like a non-matching shield, it actually does a pretty significant amount of damage. So it's almost like it has adaptive munitions. I mean, it's doing great damage too to the boss. And I'm trying to hold on to my Storm Chaser ammo for the end, because when the boss is on his last quarter of health, that's when he like mutates into this, like he gets lit up with arc. Like he's all busted and kind of crazy, and yeah, if he gets close to you, he can like instantly kill you. So when he's in that last quarter, that's when you want to dump everything that you can on him. So save yourself some heavy for the last quarter, or make sure you got your super or something, and then just try to nuke him. So I'm not sure if I use my super here. I think I might. If you do want to use your super more often in this boss fight, you can farm it on the barriers. You just let the barrier shield up and recover its health, and then break them down again. And as you shoot them, you'll farm your super energy. Okay, 43,000 damage and a bit with one grenade. Pretty good. And I've already got 3 grenades prepped again. So yeah, if you're super efficient with Quicksilver Storm, you can pretty much be shooting grenades half the time and just shooting it on its primary mode the other half. But it does take some practice getting used to and getting in the rhythm. But This was another. This was a nice section to have Quicksilver Storm for. I mean, just the standard shots with the homing missiles does damage, but being able to prep your grenades. So even if I ran out of Storm Chaser ammo, I wouldn't feel too handicapped. Just because I would have Quicksilver Storm. So in this section, there's for this whole half here, you're gonna get swarmed by Exploder Shanks. It's gonna feel like they never stop spawning, but they eventually do. So if you want to just play it safe back here and just take them out one by one until they stop spawning, you can do that. So see, I got Radiant there right before throwing those grenades. About 4 seconds of Radiant left. Got a little bit worried there because I was getting flanked by 2 Shanks. But not a big deal. I got Storm Chaser, Frenzy's procced. Had enough ammo to finish him off, so that's it. I highly suggest you farm this on Grandmaster if you can too. If you could do it in a team, it's super easy to just stock up on shards and stuff for the next season. But other than that, that's it. So if you liked it, leave a like, sub, comment. I'm happy to engage with people in the chat. So I'll see you in the next video. Take care.